Good day to you lovely people out there. How is your day going? Welcome to the other news you're never going to hear on TV. Although CNN looks like it may be getting in some fresh new reporters, so we'll see where that all heads off to. And little Brian Stelter may not have a job come this time next week, so folks, things could be changing in the world. Back to some good old common sense. Well, at least we can hope for the best anyway. So besides all of the wars and rumors of wars, which we'll get to in a little bit because it's like an everyday something is going on there, I really want to talk about two articles that I found to be, well, they're kind of freaky. So just for a little background information on yours truly, Hummingbird027, aka Christine, I grew up in Missouri, and let me tell you, there were some summers where I thought I was going to die. You could fry an egg on the hood of your vehicle. It was just unbelievable. It was all you could do to just lay there in the shade if you didn't have an air-conditioned house, and to just try and make it through until the 5 o'clock hour when it started to cool off just a little bit. And if I remember correctly, during those days growing up in Missouri between the late 70s, 80s, and 90s, it did see record temperatures into 109, 110, especially with the humidity and the heat index. So I've never seen things like this in my life, and it really gets me to wondering, we've got a U.S. food destruction happening in America, and there is a list now of all the U.S.-based food manufacturing plants that were destroyed under the Biden regime. The list is now at 99 incidents since the beginning of this year, 2020. The latest being over 10,000 head of cattle reportedly, quote unquote, died in the recent Kansas heat wave. So folks, I am not a believer that this was heat induced, although that there are some scientific things that can happen to the gut of a bovine, but I do think that something more sinister is happening in America to bring us down from within, folks. We have never had an enemy like this come against America for as long as she has been in existence, except for Britain. And, with Yahweh's help, we kicked their butts and was able to establish the colonies and to make a great country here. Now, these Kansas feedlots where an estimated 10,000 head of fat cattle were ready to be processed. That's why they were in the feedlots when all this took place, and they were ready to go to market. Now just think of how much more expensive the meat is going to be when you go to purchase hamburger or you want a nice roast for the weekend. That's why I continue to tell you all, if you can do it, or somebody that has, deserted land, they basically don't do anything with it, and you can convince your neighbor, hey, let my animals farm this land, I'll take care of them, you get a chunk of the proceeds that come from all of this, and we both can win on this, folks. There's a will, there is a way right now. You should definitely be thinking about chickens for one. Chickens are so easy to take care of, and yes, the cost for them is getting more and more expensive, but you can also supplement their feed by baking bread, and cutting it up into little cubes, and they just love that stuff. You can also let them free range. Again, if you don't have the property to free range your own poultry, you can always ask a neighbor if they can rope off a little section for you to free range and say, hey, bug repellent. Chickens are the best bug repellent. They'll eat every little bug in that square inch of land that you give them. So anyway, back to seriousness. The final death numbers continue to pour in, but the early estimate is that temperature readings for Ulysses, Kansas began to exceed 100-degree mark on June 11th. By the 13th, it was ahead 104 degrees with humidity levels ranging from 18 to 35%. That's intense. But you can get through it, which is very odd. I'm hoping that they will publish some true data that came out of this so that we all know what we're up against. But like I've said before, this is an agenda. It is the World Economic Forum, and this is their great reset. And by 2030, their plans, their agenda is that you will own nothing and you will be happy about it. Will we now? All right, for the second interesting article, and this is near and dear to my own heart, CRISPR, which is a family of DNA sequences found in the genomes of prokaryotic organisms such as bacteria and I believe it's pronounced archaea. These sequences are derived from DNA fragments of bacteriophages that had previously infected the prokaryote. These are used to detect and destroy DNA from similar bacteriophages during subsequent infections. So basically, they are using this CRISPR technology, this Cas9, and they trim out the pieces of the genetic information that they want. Then they add it into a new DNA with this new information on it, and then in hopes that the cell will replicate that. Much like what the mRNA technology we are seeing now with these new gene therapies that have now been introduced in the last 2 years. So CRISPR fried chicken. Genetically engineered hens made to kill their male chicks. Listen to this, folks. The story at a glance is each year more than 6 billion male chicks are killed worldwide, up to 300 million of them in the U.S. as part of the industrialized egg industry. Most people don't want a whole bunch of roosters running around on their land. They just basically take up all the feed, and they don't really do anything if you have tons of them, so except fight each other and everybody gets bloody. So a team of Israeli scientists have filed a concept patent that involves genetically engineering hens to pass on a lethality or killer gene to male embryos, which would eliminate them before they even hatch. Once the eggs are laid, light blue would then be used to activate the lethality gene and kill all the male embryos in vivo. Or as in a hen, it would be in ovo or in the egg. This will likely present as a more quote-unquote humane approach, but it comes with a significant risk, including to the hens, because the lethality gene is likely to produce highly toxic proteins that can make the hen sick. Well, do you think that if people are eating eggs with this stuff in it, it might make them sick too? Technocrats invent because they can, not because there is a demonstrated or logical reason to do so. We are truly witnessing the total takeover of all genetic material here on the earth. As I have said in numerous other newscasts, China is one of the biggest genetic data collectors on the earth right now, and folks, you better believe that you are in their file cabinets, folks. Let me tell you. What they're doing with that information, we still don't know yet. This just came out like almost a year and a half ago. If we don't understand what is going on, we can't stop these people and these melomaniac scientists who want to destroy all the life on the earth right now, because what does it tell us in the Bible? That God's got to come back, because they're going to destroy the earth if they don't. If he doesn't come back, mankind will literally destroy everything on the earth, and that is why the second coming has to happen. So the state of Israel's Ministry of Agricultural and Rural Development applied for a patent and Yuval Cinnamon and Inbal Bental-Cohen as the inventors use the gene editing tool CRISPR, or what it's known as clustered, regularly, interspaced, short, palindromic repeat. It inserts a foreign gene, quote unquote, in this case, the lethality gene, into the male sex Z chromosome. And this is kind of psychotic because according to GM Watch, which is Genetically Modified Watch, they quote, in order to ensure reliable killing of the male chick embryos at an early stage of their development, the lethality gene that the developers insert will have to be highly toxic. The various lethality-inducing proteins mentioned in the patent that are supposed to work by inhibiting growth or development, or essentially signaling pathways such as the bone morphogenetic protein antagonist or an RNA-guided DNA endonuclease enzyme, may be too uncertain in their effects. Therefore, the developer will also certainly choose to use a known highly toxic element, such as genes encoding from diphtheria toxin or ricin toxin, both of which are specifically mentioned in the entirety of this patent that they applied for in paragraph, I think it's 0158. As possible candidates for this lethal gene. This patent does not restrict the lethal gene to the types named, which means the scientists could use virtually anything, such as a gene encoding cholera toxin. And aside from all these problems that are inherent introducing a lethal gene into a living species that you will ultimately consume, it's the topic of its blue light activation. So this lethal gene is supposed to remain dormant until it is shrouded in this blue light exposure. But then there's a chance that it could still exert some level of toxicity even while in this inactive state. This leaky lethal gene could have implications for animal welfare and could pose a risk to mother hens. So this is the hitch. This is what is terrifying to me, folks. You know how all of us crazy people out there want to have clean food that we are eating and consuming because we don't want our bodies to be these chemical storehouses of diseases and things that just go wrong with GMOs. So we've had them have to label everything that is a genetically modified organism. Well, according to this research that they are doing in this patent, they are hoping to take this project to the next step and have already earned support from the European Commission, which states that genetically engineered hens and their eggs would not be classified as genetically modified organisms and therefore would exist outside of the EU's GMO regulations. Isn't that sneaky tricky? Even though the patent's concept does not occur in nature, the EU responded, quote unquote, this does not seem to be the case of the layer hens in question based on the provided information, according to which the transgene is only conveyed to the male embryo, not to the female embryos that develop into these layer hens. Really? They then reasoned that since the GE hens would not be considered GMOs under their definition, the altered eggs that they lay would not be either. As a result, they noted, the layer hens in questions and their eggs would not need an authorization because the patent does not offer proof that the GE hens are free from unnatural alterations. Genetically Modified Watch believes the Commission's statement that the hens would not be classified as GMOs is illegal. History has already shown that it's more than likely that fragments of lethality gene can end up in unintended places outside of the Z chromosome on chromosomes that could end up in female chicks, for instance. And I quote from GM Watch, "There appears to be no published evidence showing that this procedure does not give rise to the inadvertent transgene fragment integration and that the resulting transgenic founder hens and their female offspring are free from such foreign DNA. The so-called off-target effects are known outcomes of CRISPR technology, including CRISPR-Cas9, which is supposedly to be even more precise than the original technology. One study searched for unintended mutations based on the separated study that they used the CRISPR-Cas9 to restore the sight to blind mice by correcting a genetic mutation. The researchers sequenced the entire genome of the CRISPR-edited mice to search for those mutations. Unfortunately, with technocracy and how our world is going right now, especially with the loss of all of these food processing facilities, almost 100 of them now, folks, it's possible that these CRISPR chickens could follow a similar pathway and end up in supermarkets before long-term safety and toxicity studies can be conducted. For now, the best way to avoid this gene-edited foods or any GMO or gene-engineered food is to purchase organic or even better, biodynamic foods that are local farmer grown. Know who you are getting your food from if you're not raising it yourself, folks. Okay, now getting on to the wars and rumors of wars. Lithuania, this is like major news. It lit the fuse on the World War III agenda right now. I believe that we are headed very quickly into Ezekiel 38 and 39, which I believe will be World War III, and it will take place after the rapture of the bride of Christ. So how close are we, folks? Can you hear the trumpets blasting? Rosh Hashanah is very close, and I speculate a lot on this channel, but I'm just going to throw this one out there because I just love talking about the Lord and his feast days. They are so important because out of all of his feast days, it shows the plan that Yahweh has for mankind. Over 7,000 years worth of information, folks, wrapped up into his feast days. There's something to be said about studying Torah. The next feast day that is coming, and I am super excited for because it means that it'll be the end of Shemitah and I can start growing food again, and I am so excited. Only those of you who have done Shemitah, who have kept Shemitah, the 7th year Sabbath rest of the land, will understand what I'm talking about. When people are out there eating salads and having fresh broccoli and cauliflower, it just makes me cringe. It's like, oh my goodness, I gotta have some. The temptation is for real. But as with everything, we love the Lord more, so we overcome our temptation because we love him more. And if we're seeing all these things happen on the world stage right now, and Lithuania is just the next one to fall in line with all these grouped up people in Ezekiel 38 through 39, we're getting down to the biblical wire, as it would be seen. Some thoughts that I have is that it's really interesting that just last year, towards the end of last year, the World Economic Forum just came out and stated its agenda, and they are moving forward with this, whether everybody agrees with them or not. They're going to do what they want. They're the rich elite of the world. They will not be stopped. And why? Because I believe they've got the Antichrist on their side right now. I do believe that that man of sin is actually born now into the world, and he is functioning behind the scenes, as Prince Charles stated in COP26. Basically, he said, we need a vast military-style campaign to marshal the strength of the global private sector with trillions at his disposal. You can find this video everywhere on the internet. Whether he did this by mistake or on purpose, Prince Charles revealed that there is one person behind the scenes, and they are calling all the shots right now, folks. Daniel chapter 8 and 9. And with their 2030 agenda, just think of it, folks. This year at Rosh Hashanah, which is the head of the civil new year, or no, it's the religious new year. I always get those confused. It is the head of the religious new year. And once that time hits, it's exactly 7 years till 2030. And as I just stated this, my counter on my cell phone just hit 2030. As soon as I started saying that mark, folks, I know that God is coming very, very soon. And I don't believe in coincidences anymore. Everything is ordained by the hand of God. Every hair on our head is counted every single day and written down somewhere. So Lithuania banned the transit of Russian goods to Kaliningrad effective on June 18th. Kaliningrad, which is wedged between Poland on the west and Lithuania on the east, is home to almost 500,000 Russians and the headquarters of the Russian Navy's Baltic Sea Force. Lithuania claims it is simply abiding by the sanctions imposed by the EU. After all, Lithuania is a member of the European Union and NATO, but that is the point, isn't it? This is a deliberate provocation. They keep poking the bear. It is laying economic siege to a vital interest of Russia. While there is no immediate danger to the Russian population in Kaliningrad, this is a flashpoint that could actually lead to a hot war as opposed to a special military operation. So what's the difference between the two? The SMO, you leave communications, electrical infrastructure, transportation infrastructure, and fuel depots largely intact. And in SMO, you try to minimize civilian and military casualties. War, on the other hand, is terrifying. If Russia opts for war, the restraint that characterized its activities in Ukraine will be replaced by a full-on attack to key military installations and assets in that region, as well as the destruction of the communications, electrical, transportation, and fuel resources of the adversary. They will probably take out critical satellite communications and intelligence collection systems of the United States and Europe. So let's look at briefly how the West is fighting Moscow under the threshold of an all-out war. Kaliningrad, home to some 430,000 people, is surrounded by Lithuania and Poland, both EU countries. Lithuania said it was merely implementing the new EU rules by choosing to block the transit of sanctioned goods such as steel traveling to and from Kaliningrad via the only railway line connecting to the territory. It means the only way for Russia to supply the territory now without worrying about EU sanctions is via the sea. The Black Sea is going to become, I think, this major battleground. Folks, a lot of lies are being told about what is going on in Russia at this point, and I've watched several different YouTubers who go to local stores in and around Moscow and in their little boroughs or little townships, whatever you want to call them over there, and none of their prices are changing. They're actually going down in prices for the products that they consume every day. The only thing that is going up in price is things like Coca-Cola and Pepsi and just little items like that. Everything else is produced by the neighboring countries, if not in Russia itself. And those prices are not increasing, folks. They aren't getting hurt out of these sanctions at all. We are. So again, everything is lining up to fulfill Ezekiel 38 and 39. This is pretty much the climax of Israel's return to the land in the Middle East and the land of Israel, basically. And from now on, when these wars happen, such as Isaiah 17 and Psalms 83, and all of these people groups start coming against Israel and fighting, each time the Lord is going to bring Israel victory, and her land is going to be increased, and it's going to keep increasing as she keeps expanding outward, where she's not going to have any bars or gates. So there's going to be no more walls separating her from other countries. And then she's going to say, hey, look, all of our enemies around us have been dealt with. We are now living in peace and security. And so Bible prophecy will be unveiled. And Ezekiel 38 and 39 will come and attack them, pounce upon their heads when they least expect it. This is why God, Yahweh himself, must intervene into World War III. Otherwise, Israel's name would be completely wiped off of the map, which is what a lot of Islamic nations want. This war will threaten the very existence of Israel as a nation. Even before drilling down some of the details of Gog from the land of Magog, if you go back to chapter 37 in Ezekiel, it speaks of Israel being regathered from their graves in the nations and becoming a nation again of their own. That happened in 1948. It was the famous dry bones chapter, and its fulfillment began with Israel becoming a nation again in 1948, like I said. And what's really weird is that Ezekiel 40 to the end of the book in chapter 48 speaks of the millennial kingdom when Yeshua comes back to rule and reign from Jerusalem in his kingdom after he has returned. But squeezed in between these two bookends are Ezekiel 38 and 39. And so Gog from the land of Magog war will occur somewhere between Israel becoming a nation again and the return of Yeshua HaMashiach. Praise Yahweh, it's coming, folks. Ezekiel 38, 1 through 6. Who are these identifying players? And the word of the Lord came to me, saying, Son of man, set your face towards Gog of the land of Magog, the prince of Rosh, Meshech, and Tubal, and prophesy against him, and say, Thus says the Lord Yahweh, Behold, I am against you, O Gog, prince of Rosh, Meshech, and Tubal. I will turn you about and put hooks into your jaws, and I will bring you out, and all your army, horses and horsemen, all of them splendidly attired, a great company with buckler and shield, all of them wielding swords. Persia, Ethiopia, and Put with them, all of them with shield and helmet. Gomer with all its troops, Beth Togarmah from the remotest parts of the north with all its troops, many peoples with you. The first few verses names all the player in this coming unfolding drama. We have lots of names of countries that will be familiar to you, like Magog, Rosh, Meshech, Tubal, and that lovely spring retreat, Gomer. Okay, so maybe these aren't so familiar. Let's lay these out. So Genesis chapter 10 and 2, the sons of Japheth were Gomer and Magog and Madai and Javan and Tubal and Meshech and Tiras. Now, whoever Gog is, I mean, we all speculate because Putin sure is acting a little goggish these days. But Magog is southern Russia. That is where the sons of Japheth in Genesis chapter 10 verse 2, where Josephus tells us Magog founded the Magogians or the Scythians, and those are the people who were the most ruthless in past history in that part of the country. So ruthless, in fact, that China actually built the Great Wall to stop the Scythians from coming into their country and just completely obliterating their populations. And we also know Persia to be Iran. We call it Iran these days, but actually, if you go to Iran and talk to Iranians, they claim that they are Persians, and it is true. Then you have Ethiopia and Kush, which is Sudan and Ethiopia. And Put is possibly Somalia. Quite literally, it is probably Libya. Gomer being central Turkey, possibly Germany, and Togarma, eastern Germany or Armenia. And what is very interesting to me is that Germany could very well be a player with Rosh and Gog, because she is bound by some heavy contracts with Russia over that gas pipeline, folks. These are the hooks in the jaw that God is going to bring all of this World War III to surface. And this ain't even going to be it. I mean, this is just going to be the layup to where the 10 kings come after Ezekiel 38 and 39, the World War III war. Then the 10 kings rise, and then you get Armageddon. You get the Antichrist reigning supremely for 42 months unrestrained. The two witnesses, the first 3.5 years, they are doing their thing with the 144,000 in Israel. Folks, a lot is going to start happening, and it's all gearing up right now to be set in place for all these players to embark upon the great stage called Earth. So, in other news, China and the U.S. have escalated over legal status of Taiwan Strait after Beijing rejects it as international waters. So, Reuters reported last Tuesday that the White House earlier this month reaffirmed its stance that Taiwan Strait constitutes international waters, following the latest U.S. warship sail-through, which had put China's PLA Eastern Theater Command on high alert. So Beijing issued its own statement and definition after this last Tuesday rebuff, I guess you would say it, hitting back that the strait is not international waters, thus placing limits on the movements of foreign military vessels in those waters, and further reasserting that it constitutes the mainland's exclusive economic zone. So Bloomberg reported just today that Biden regime officials are increasingly concerned the stance could result in a more frequent challenges at sea for the democratically governed island, according to people familiar with this matter. Washington being alarmed over the timing of these events, not only giving the ongoing fallout from the Russian war in Ukraine, which Beijing has refused to outright condemn. A week ago, China's President Xi Jinping has signed an order which fundamentally expands the conditions under which the People's Liberation Army troops can be deployed. The order introduced legal frameworks to deploy troops in non-war military actions, which took effect last Wednesday, and it could have significant repercussions for tensions between the U.S. and Washington allies like Australia or Japan, and in places like South China Sea and the Taiwan Strait, given the order loosens the condition under which it's possible to initiate military operations other than war, which involves operations that do not explicitly involve direct conflict or combat. It's just getting hotter out there, folks. This was an article that kind of struck me because the hooks in the jaw that are talked about in Ezekiel 38 and 39 have to deal specifically with Gog from the land of Magog and Israel. Something that happens with them that ties them together. Both of them are, how shall I say this? Both of them Russia and Israel are fighting for energy dominance in the Middle East right now. And Russia obviously has a bigger chunk of Europe and the Middle East and all of that area. But Israel is becoming an absolute contender in the energy ring right now with the Leviathan find. And and the pipeline that they are growing day by day by day into towards Turkey up that border, and then also into Cyprus and Greece. Now also with Isaiah 17 in mind, where Damascus, the oldest continuous living city that has ever existed on the earth, of over 4,000 years, people have been living in Damascus, folks. You got to understand, it's old, it's ancient, and there is a ton of history there. And what is taking place right now is leading up to Isaiah chapter 17. The burden of Damascus. Behold, Damascus is taken away from being a city, and it shall be a ruinous heap. With these fresh attacks that happen as Israel is bombing Iranian targets inside of Syria, and honestly, they're protecting themselves because nobody else seems to want to help them protect their borders, so they have to do what they have to do. Russia says out of the Times of Israel, preparing UN resolution condemning Israel for Damascus airport attack. Russia is now putting together a proposal for a UN Security Council resolution condemning Israel, which it blames for a recent attack on Damascus airport that put the site out of commission for several days. Israeli officials confirmed to the station that Russia is working on the resolution, but doubted that it would gain much support. A draft memo declares that the attack was carried out against international law, undermines regional stability, and violates Syrian sovereignty as well as that of other countries, and apparent reference to the airspace from which the attack was launched. Although Israel has not confirmed it was behind the strike, and therefore the details remain unclear, Lebanon has in the past complained to the UN after Israeli jets allegedly violated its airspace to carry out airstrikes in Syria. So again, it's all leading up to biblical stuff coming, folks. Let's get on to some other news now. Globalist surveillance state. The World Economic Forum begins secret smart city operations in the Netherlands. Apeldoorn has been transformed by the WEF without consulting its residents. It has now become the first surveillance city or smart city of the Netherlands. An unknown Austrian company, Radio LED, has rolled out a 5G network inside the city based on a secret agreement with the municipality. The municipality receives no revenue from the project. The direction lies entirely with Radio LED. The company also manages a data obtained from thousands of sensors that follow Apeldoorn citizens everywhere. Apeldoorn Smart City is just one of the many projects that WEF is implementing in the Netherlands. The network organization from Switzerland is intertwined through the many tentacles of Dutch politicians, from Queen Maxima to Sigrid Kaag and Mark Rutte, who are implementing the globalist agenda of the great leader Klaus Schwab, the Great Reset. So what Apeldoorn, the Australian tech company, Radio LED, is collecting on all of these citizens is being kept absolutely secret. No one is being able to find out what is going on with this. The citizens are now beginning to ask, why did the municipality enter into a secret agreement with Radio LED? And why does the municipality of Apeldoorn respond to questions from citizens by announcing that they should contact Radio LED with questions about the content of the Smart City project? And are residents really waiting for this Smart City project? So the secret contract that Apeldoorn signed with Radio LED is strongly reminiscent of the Ministry of Economic Affairs agreement, also secret at the time, with telecommunications companies, which stipulated that municipalities would be left out of the loop and that the Dutch population could not object to the deployment of future wireless communication networks. Although Apeldoorn, for the first municipality in the Netherlands to implement this smart city project. This project is also the agenda in other municipalities. However, the politician debate on the radiation and the 5G dossier in The Hague has been hushed up. 5G and Health is what it published by the Health Council of 2020, shows that the impact of 5G on health has not yet been researched in part, and that actual health risks are not known, and that links to 5G and health damage for several diseases cannot be ruled out. I hope you all are preparing for this next article, because right now as it stands, last time I got gas was $5.49 here in Palmer, Alaska. And guess what? In Mendocino, California, the most expensive gas in the United States is now at a terrifying $9.94 per gallon. How much longer are we going to be able to hold out and maintain our jobs before all of the fabric of America just begins to rapidly fall apart? And while all this is going on, I have always said I would like to see myself personally, Alaska secede from the Union and to become its own powerhouse. We have the resources here to start our own energy revolution here in this country, or civil war, whichever one you want to call it at this point. Texas, yes, Texas just took it a notch up. They just went nuclear, folks, announcing they want to secede from the U.S. in 2023 as GOP pushes for referendum vote, and declaring that unlawfully President Joe Biden was not legitimately elected. Texas Republicans are pushing for a referendum to decide whether the state should secede from the United States. The demand for Texans to be allowed to vote on the issue in 2023 was just one of the major adoptions in the Texas GOP party platform, following last week's state convention in Houston. Under the section titled State Sovereignty, the platform states, pursuant to Article 1, Section 1 of the Texas Constitution, the federal government has impaired our right of local self-government. Therefore, federally mandated legislation that infringes upon the 10th Amendment rights of Texas should be ignored, opposed, refused, and nullified. Texas retains the right to secede from the U.S., and Texas legislators should be called upon to pass a referendum consistent thereto. In another section of state governance, the platform states that Texas Republicans want the state legislature to pass a bill in the next session requiring a referendum in the 2023 general elections of the people of Texas to determine whether or not the state of Texas should reassert its status as an independent nation. Man, I wish Alaska and Texas would both do this. Then maybe this regime that is in office now in Washington, D.C. might actually get their butt kicked for once. All right, folks, I'm going to end with this last article, and this is really just an awesome article. It's sad, but it's awesome. Anyway, you'll find out here. Church in Wise County, Texas burns down to the ground. The only thing left standing was the cross. That's amazing. A church in Wise County, Texas, is gathering for prayers on Sunday morning following a fire that destroyed entirely the building. The fire broke out on June 17th in Balsora Baptist Church, located in Bridgeport. The Wise County Emergency Services Department Number 2 said the fully engulfed fire took the structure, but not the cross. Photos of the scene shared by the church and the ESD showed the cross standing among the remnants of the church building, and part of it was on fire while they were taking pictures of it. It's quite incredible, actually. Wise County ESD said the church's structure began to collapse while the firefighters were inside, but several firefighters were treated or seen by the EMS on the scene. The causes of the fire remains under investigation. All right, in closing, let's talk about faith. Faith is such an important thing to have, even for non-believers. It's so important because if you can take a step out in faith and it happens that is God's will for your life and all these things come, it's like the whole universe comes together and it just provides everything that you need to fulfill that thing that you're wanting to fulfill, that situation. That is faith in action. And this is what God the Father wants of all of his children, the creations that he's made upon the earth. So Daniel chapter 3 is one of those faith chapters in the Bible, and it's actually paired with the coming Antichrist and this worshiping him and his image and this bestial system and all this nonsense that's going to happen, folks. It's going to be really intense. And Nebuchadnezzar was kind of pulled out of these, line of kings, which he was the head, where it shows that he's going to make this big golden image, and everybody was supposed to fall down and worship it when all of these songs started, and they were all supposed to fall down. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were along with the prophet Daniel, were some of the people who were taken captive by the Babylonians. And it just so happened that Daniel had found favor in Nebuchadnezzar's sight because he was able, through Yahweh's help, to interpret Nebuchadnezzar's dreams of this golden image. And so at this point in the story, we have Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who are, basically being thrown under the bus by Nebuchadnezzar's little councilmen, whoever you want to call them, who basically wanted to destroy these Hebrew young men because of the service, their impeccable service that they gave to Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom, although they were not a part of their culture. So starting in verse 8 of Daniel chapter 3, therefore at that time certain Chaldeans came near and brought accusations against the Jews. They answered Nebuchadnezzar the king, O king, live forever. You, O king, have made a decree that every man that shall hear the sound of the horn, the flute, the zither, the lyre, harp, pipes, and all kinds of music shall fall down and worship the golden image. And whoever doesn't fall down and worship shall be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. There are certain Jews whom you have appointed over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, have not respected you. They don't serve your gods nor worship the golden image which you have set up. Then Nebuchadnezzar, in his rage and fury, commanded to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Then they brought these men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar answered them, Is it on purpose, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you don't serve my God nor worship the golden image which I have set up? Now, if you are ready, when you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of musics, to fall down and worship the image which I have made. But if you don't worship, you shall be cast the same hour into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. And who is that God that shall deliver you out of my hands? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered the king Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. If it be so, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of your hands, O king. But if not, be it known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods, nor worship the golden image which you have set up. Then was Nebuchadnezzar full of fury, and the form of his appearance was changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He spoke and commanded that they should heat the furnace 7 times more than it was usually heated. He commanded certain mighty men who were in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and to cast them into the burning fiery furnace. Then these men were bound in their pants, their tunics, and their mantles, and their other garments, and were cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Therefore, because the king's commandment was urgent, and the furnace exceeding hot, the flames of the fire killed those men who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down bound in the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Then Nebuchadnezzar the king was astonished and rose up in haste. He spoke and said to his counselors, didn't we cast 3 men bound in the midst of the fire? They answered the king, true, O king. He answered, look, I see 4 men loose walking in the midst of the fire, and they are unharmed. And the aspect of the 4th is like a son of the gods. Then Nebuchadnezzar came near to the mouth of the burning fiery furnace. He spoke and said, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, you servants of the Most High God, come forth and come here. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came forth out of the midst of the fire. The satraps, the deputies, the governors, and the king's counselors, being gathered together, saw these men that the fire had no power on their bodies, nor was their hair on their heads singed. Neither were their pants changed, nor had the smell of fire passed on them. Nebuchadnezzar spoke and said, Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and delivered his servants who trusted in him, and have changed the king's word, and have yielded their bodies that they might not serve nor worship any god except their own Yahweh. Therefore I make a decree that every people, nation, and language which speak anything evil against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be cut in pieces, and their houses shall be made a dunghill, because there is no other God who is able to deliver after this sort. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. And folks, there is coming a day right now, very soon here, where we're going to be having to stand on our faith and having to uphold. I mean, we've already been tested these last 2 years, how we were going to stand up against the onslaughts of this wicked and oppressive people who totally want you to conform to their ways and their beliefs. And us saying no and standing up and being fired and losing our jobs, losing our families, all kinds of terrible things happened in the last 2 years for all of us. And those who are standing up for our faith, well, we're still standing strong, and the salt is still salty, and the light upon the earth has enlightened the minds of men and women right now, folks. And people are waking up to the crazy stuff that's going on. And we're starting to take back our sovereignty, our rights to say what we want, to feel how we want, and to do as our God has commanded. because it is His will that we seek out in this life, and doing His will and ushering in the kingdom of God, I believe is happening quicker and quicker. Folks, like I always say, keep looking up. Our redemption draweth nigh, folks. He's coming soon. Yeshua is coming soon. When you see Him in the clouds, it's going to be a turning point, folks. You don't want to be a Laodicean. You want to be a Philadelphian. Love you all so very much. Maranatha, everyone. Love you.